Hi, this is the I without the disorder, and today I'm going to talk about attachment theory. So, attachment theory proposes that people have different attachment styles, and there are 4 styles. They are safely attached, avoidant, dependent, and chaotic. So, if a child is safely attached, it means that their caregiver looks after their needs enough and they are not frightening to the child. So simply put, there is no trauma. So this really is the ideal attachment style that people strive for. And an example of how a safe attachment prevents trauma would be, say you have a child playing on a playground and an infant. At some point there comes a dog and barks at them, and the child is really scared and runs to their caregiver, and the caregiver picks them up into their arms and speaks soothing words to them and says, "It's okay, I'm here." And also something that would really help the child is if the caregiver helps them to make sense of the scary experience. So if they just put what happened into a narrative and saying, "You were playing on the playground and then a big scary dog came and barked at you. Then you came over to me and I soothed you and said it's okay." So in that way, the child will be able to process the scary experience and it will be filed away into an archive of memories, and it will not be trauma, because trauma is basically an unprocessed experience that keeps coming up in flashbacks. So this is how safe attachment prevents trauma. If the caregiver is not a safe person for the child, then they might have learned that from early on, so they would not come running over to the caregiver, or they might do that and then experience that the caregiver is not safe, is not protecting them. So if the caregiver is making fun of them for being scared of the dog, for example, or they dismiss them, they don't soothe them, they don't try to help them with their fear, if they get angry at them, anything that leaves the child alone basically with the scary experience and rejects them, then it will have been a traumatic, or it will stay a traumatic experience, and they cannot process it. And if you take just this single experience, it might mean that the child will stay or will develop a phobia of dogs, maybe for the rest of their life, or they might start getting anxious and having panic attacks when they grow older, whenever they hear the barking of a dog. So I think this is a really good example of how important the emotional support of a caregiver is for a child, and how it makes them feel safe. So if you look at this long term, if no one's ever there for a child, they will accumulate so many scary experiences, because when you're a tiny little child, just about everything's scary. Anything will scare you. But all of that will then end up being trauma if no one's there for you to ever soothe you. And that's how complex trauma comes into being for this child. And that's why emotional support really is the most important thing in a parent-child relationship. So That's the safe attachment style. And then when we look at the different styles that are informed by trauma, there's one that's avoidant attachment. So the working model in avoidant attachment is basically a belief that says, I'm right, everything's right with me, but there's something wrong with other people. And that's opposed to the working model of the safe attachment, which would be, I'm right and other people are right, so everything's okay. So yeah, in avoidant attachment style, the child learns that they cannot rely on their caregiver to help them and soothe them, that they are not safe with them, but instead they learn to do everything on their own. They learn that they have to be independent and not rely on other people and not go to them for help. So whenever a caregiver doesn't look properly after the needs of a child and there's trauma, there will always be shame for the child. And with an avoidant attachment style, the child will learn to disconnect from that feeling of shame. So they won't feel that anymore. And they will push away their own emotions just as much as they push other people away. And they will probably feel shame when they are with other people. They will feel awkward, social anxiety. So they prefer to be on their own. And this is in contrast to the dependent attachment style, where a person will feel a lot of shame. And they will have the working model of, there's something wrong with me, but other people are right. And this person will really be drawn to other people and always look for help from other people, and they won't feel able to do things on their own and to stay alone, spend time on their own. They will always feel the need to be around other people. But no matter how much they socialize, no matter how much help they receive from other people, they will still have this feeling, there's something wrong with me. It's like they cannot be reassured. So while the avoidant attachment style means that a person is pushing away other people, the dependent attachment style means that a person is clinging. They're clinging to other people. So in both cases, there's an imbalance. And I don't know about you, but when I read about these different styles, immediately what I had to think of is the avoidant attachment style sounds like a stereotypical, or like one of the stereotypes that exists about men in our society, and the dependent attachment style is like one of the stereotypes that exists about women. And just from observing people and all of my life experience, I'm absolutely sure there are much more men who have an avoidant attachment style than women, and much more women who have a dependent attachment style than men. That's why these stereotypes exist. What person do you think of when you think of a loner? Is it a man or a woman? And what person do you think of when you think of someone who's clingy? Is it a man or a woman? So what happens in our society is just that within the patriarchy and the ideology of the patriarchy, boys learn that they have to be independent and they have to be able to do everything on their own. They have to be competent at everything. They must not ask for help. They must never show any vulnerability. They must not be scared or sad. the only emotion that's allowed is anger. They have to be assertive. So they really get pushed into this attachment style of being avoidant. They usually get neglected when it comes to learning how to be social and empathetic. And on the other hand, within the patriarchy, girls typically do learn how to be hypersocial and always think of other people first and not of their own needs. How to look after other people, take care of them, always thinking of how to please them, and not how to be independent, not how to be assertive. They mustn't be ever angry at other people. So they get pushed into this dependent attachment style. So boys basically learn that they are superior to others. They always have to appear superior to others. And girls that they are inferior. Which also means that boys get pushed towards narcissism and girls get pushed towards egoism or being people pleasers. So in both cases you've got this huge imbalance, and that just perfectly correlates with the working models that I gave you. So either there's something wrong with me but people are right, or there's everything right with me but people are wrong. And in both cases, as I already said in my video about trauma and dissociation, all of these people will have suppressed parts. So everyone is born with the basic emotions of anger, sadness, fear, joy. So the boys learn to suppress the fear and the sadness, and the girls to suppress the anger. So this will be suppressed parts of their personality that they could not develop, which they had to dissociate from, which is already trauma. So when you see an avoidant person, you might ask, where are the sad parts, or where's their fear? And for a dependent person, where's their anger? Where's their assertiveness? I'm always asking that myself when I see people like that. It's like these emotions exist in everyone, and if they don't ever come up, they must be suppressed. They must be hidden somewhere in there. Well, of course, this is just about the norms that exist in our society, the gender norms. And of course, there are avoidant women and dependent men. They exist, of course. Okay, and the last style is the chaotic attachment style. This is where the working model of a person is, there's something wrong with me and there's something wrong with other people. And there's nothing that can be done about it. So, while with the other two trauma styles, at least one of the two things is right, there's nothing right here, everything's wrong. So there's really it's a really hopeless worldview. There's really this sense of having given up. While with the other two styles, people usually find a way to arrange themselves. They're not happy or complete either, but they find a way to cope. Or they try. While with this chaotic attachment style, it's much more likely that people will be aware of their own suffering. It will be more extreme. So, if everything's wrong, it's much more likely that they will try to find a solution to that, or try to figure out why everything's wrong. Usually this comes from a place of believing as I said, there's something wrong with me. So these people might try to find out, what is it that's wrong with me? And that way they might be much more likely to find out that, ideally that they are traumatized and that there's nothing wrong with them. They're just having a completely normal reaction to trauma from their childhood. But the sad truth is that it's very likely that they might end up with psychiatry or a psychiatry influenced psychologist or counselor who then reinforces that belief that there's something wrong with them by telling them that they are disordered, which basically is just, it just leads to re-traumatizing the person and reinforcing this negative self-view that they already have from their trauma. So that's the opposite of healing. And it's not trauma-informed. So people who have this chaotic attachment style, it means that they are both avoidant and dependent. So within one relationship, they will swing back and forth between pushing away the other person and then clinging to them. So it's like a pattern. And I think, or I'm sure that a lot of people who have a chaotic attachment style, they will end up getting diagnosed, if they do go to a therapist or to psychiatry, they often get diagnosed with having borderline disorder, which I believe is just, I don't think that exists. It's just a description of complex trauma, one of the many, just like being bipolar. That's also a form of having complex trauma. And most mental health issues come from trauma anyway. It doesn't have to be complex trauma, but it's trauma. So these people in their childhood that learned that other people are not safe, and they also will have been abused and neglected, so that they came up with this negative model of themselves, where there's a lot of shame and self-hate and not feeling adequate to deal with life because they are just so heavily traumatized. Well, and anyone who has complex trauma from early childhood on, they will be on the spectrum of dissociation. They will be far down on a spectrum of dissociation. They might not get diagnosed with dissociative identity, but they will have a lot of dissociation and disconnection between their personality parts. So I realized that some of my parts have an avoidant attachment style and others a dependent attachment style. So the goal for all of these three trauma styles is, of course, to find the golden middle, to get into balance and find the middle between pushing people away and clinging to them. So to reach the secure or safe attachment. And that's what you call an earned safe attachment. And we try to gain this through therapy. So it's basically a state in a relationship where there are clear boundaries, but you still feel connected to the other person. And when you come from a place of trauma, that sounds really utopian and strange. How is that possible? But yeah. So in therapy for complex trauma, that's obviously the long-term goal, and it takes a lot of time to get there. And you usually, you know, you have to start by getting to know yourself, getting to know your parts, trying to connect to the different parts, or just figuring out who's there when you have DI. And that can take years. And then it's about these parts, the relationship between these parts within yourself. So you have to explore and kind of working is not the right word, but it's about the relationship with your parts and with yourself. And through good therapy that transforms over time. And you know, you try to find balance within yourself. And when you have balance within yourself, you can then have balance with other people. But of course, all of this is just possible if there's a good, safe relationship between the therapist and the client, which, you know, is supposed to be that corrective experience which you didn't get to have in childhood with your caregiver. So this is attachment theory, and as always, I think this is something everyone should know. We should teach this in school. But yeah, I hope you could take something away from this, and see you next time.